On this episode of the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast, I'm joined by Julian Long to talk about the 1982 and 1985 vault track, Teacher, Teacher, a song Prince felt was worthy of recording twice with different personnel. Welcome back to the show, Julian.
Thanks so much for having me, Jason. We made it without it being a full year this time. I'm excited. We're 2 months shy of a year.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I know we last recorded an episode for the Batman soundtrack, so we were still doing official Prince recordings and releases at the time, but now we're doing vault stuff, man. So it's kind of sketchy, cagey kind of discussions going on. Some of these tracks have been officially released, some of them not. This is one that has been now, as of 2023, has seen 2 official releases, so we're not talking about bootleg anymore.
Right.
So I feel like this is on the up and up. I can share discussions about this one without feeling too guilty. Not that I've ever really felt guilty about talking about bootlegs, but so we were talking a little bit ahead of the show, history about this song, history of your acknowledgement and listening to the song Teacher, Teacher. This is not a song, it sounds like, that you have a lot of history with, correct?
This one is brand new to me, which is actually pretty exciting. When we first recorded, you told me that sometimes people come to the show with a history with the song, and sometimes they don't really know the song, and you just kind of break down the lyrics. And I remember thinking, oh, I could never do that. Like, it has to be one that I'm deeply connected to. But this one, I only listened to not that long ago in preparation for this. So, this one's fresh.
Yeah, and honestly, for me, this is not this is not a song that I have a deep history with. I mean, I've told this story in other episodes when we've been doing vault tracks and bootleg songs. I wasn't a big bootleg guy, didn't really have the avenues to access bootlegs. And then during like the Napster era, that would have been like the first time I was starting to get into quote unquote bootlegs, because they weren't shared in the same way as they were back in the 80s and 90s through tape and right, burned CDs. So that the whole file sharing thing. But in the early 2000s, when I was really into Napster and downloading quote unquote bootlegs and unreleased material for my favorite artists, I kind of missed a lot of Prince's stuff. I only caught like some of the big ones, and I wasn't going deep down the rabbit hole that some people do. And a song like Teacher, Teacher was not a track that I became aware of really and heard until I started digging into like stuff that people had been posting on YouTube. So like prior to the release of some of these deluxe editions, like the Purple Rain, the 1999, the Sign of the Times, where music has been now officially released and you can stream it, and like I said, it's all on the up and up. YouTube was my go-to for bootlegs, and I would just stream them there, listen to people who have managed to upload unreleased Prince material, and nobody has flagged it or removed it, which I was thankful for, in the 2010s. But having cleaned up versions of this song released on both 1999 and Sign of the Times is always going to be the way I listen to it now moving forward. And so, like, for you, I imagine, you just went to your streaming platform, you found the song. Do you have a particular version that you ended up listening to? Was it the one from 82 or the one from 85, or do you not even really not sure which one?
So the 82, I listened to 2 versions. One I found on YouTube. Actually, both of them I found on YouTube first. And the one that I like better, it's just Prince and the guitar.
Yep, that's the 82.
Like, there's no drums. It's very, very sparse. And it's slower, so you can hear it better. The other one, I think, is the one that you were telling me about, which was it had, you could hear the drums were pretty heavy in it. It was sped up to the point of almost being unclear. rarely do I have to read the lyrics when I listen to a song, but that one I did.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I actually prefer the simpler 82 version. That's just Prince. It has Kiowa Trail Home Studio in Chanhassen. According to Prince Vault, this was spring of 82 that he recorded this one. And yeah, it's just basically Prince and his guitar, and it's got that kind of old rock, a little old rock and roll feel to it, 50s, 60s garage rock kind of feel to it to me. Wendy and Lisa's version, and I call it their version because they're the ones, they basically took the track from 82 and just added additional instrumentation and then added their vocals, co-lead vocals along with Prince's. It's way more embellished, of course. I mean, they added stuff, so of course it's more embellished. And it sounds good,
Right.
but I do prefer the simpler, stripped down original version from just Prince. So if I have to pick, that's the one I'm going to pick.
Same here. I find too, and we'll get into this more as we look at the lyrics, that for me it changes the intent of the song or the
It does.
the feeling of it. When it's different when it's just Prince speaking directly to, this air quotes teacher, versus when it's treated as a song and you have multiple voices doing that same part. It doesn't feel as personal. And once we look into the lyrics, I think this song was a lot more personal than the 85 version makes it out to be.
I agree. And then there's the whole gender dynamic aspect around it too. Having it being from the
Changes
perspective of
yeah.
a man versus women. Although Prince's vocals are audible in the 85 version, Wendy and Lisa's vocals, I think, are stronger and stick out more. So, and then they change the pronoun. There's one instance in the song in the 85 version where there's a pronoun used in the first verse, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But they change that to represent their pronouns, and that also changes it as well. And that's okay. So just backing up, then, this song, Teacher, Teacher, I think is an interesting one because you can look at it maybe more than one way in terms of how you interpret it. So the question that seems to be most easily raised when talking about the song is this just one big metaphor? Or should the lyrics be taken at more of a face value? Meaning, like, is the teacher just a metaphor for somebody who's maybe older, more mature, more experienced, has more authority over the person who is calling themselves a young boy or a young girl in the song? Or, again, is this literally like, are we somebody singing a song about their teacher and some sort of inappropriate relationship they're engaged in with this teacher?
Right.
By the definition of the word teacher, like somebody who is teaching them in some sort of class setting, but it still has that authority and power over them potentially. But then is it more of a literal teacher or versus a metaphorical teacher? And that's where I think the debate potentially could lie, or maybe not just debate, but just a differing way of interpreting the song and the lyrics. Any general thoughts about that before we dig deeper?
I wrestled with that. So here's the funny thing. I only heard this song a little while after seeing, that video that resurfaced of Prince as a kid, like when he was in 5th or 6th grade, talking about the teacher strike.
Yep.
I only heard this song after having seen that video. So when I looked even at the title, that was the first thing that came to my mind was little kid Prince talking about supporting the teachers, which made this a really kind of devastating read going into the lyrics of it. I look at it, knowing good and well that a couple albums prior to when he recorded this, he had already released Sister. Mm-hmm. I look at this as straight ahead. It's exactly what it sounds like. I think for whatever reasons, he may have chosen to back away from it a little bit to kind of to maybe pull a curtain down to maybe protect the identity of whoever this person may have been. But I think this was straight ahead. I don't see it. I see how it can be read as a metaphor. I don't believe it to be. And that's just because of how personal the lyrics are.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. See, and I originally was on the same page as you in terms of listening to it and thinking of it as Prince writing a song about a teacher that he had who maybe was potentially emotionally manipulative, and having that resonate with him to the point like he took that with him through adulthood. So there's very little indication in this song about the specifics are fuzzy. Let's just put it that way. The specifics are very fuzzy.
Right.
He keeps it very vague, and potentially, like you said, for good reason, to kind of hide identities, or to make it personal but not too personal. Like Sister was almost too personal, and so then it started to become like, oh, well, who's he talking about? Oh, well, he has a sister who lives in New York City. It must be that person. So he kind of fucked that up with his sister by giving a little bit too many details. So I can see him a couple years later wanting to express another similar type of story, or a song that deals with kind of tough emotional, potentially, and physical abuse, but doing it in a way that isn't so overt, so people can maybe digest it a little easier. Sister was hard to digest for a lot of people. And this is a lot easier to digest. Yeah, right, exactly. It's a rough song. And actually, I think how you interpret the song, whether you think it was a real life scenario that he's writing about with a teacher that he had, versus a metaphor, can potentially affect one's ability to enjoy this song, depending on your sensitivities and how you feel about that kind of potential inappropriate relationship. Like, if you think of it as a real life thing, I could see people being really turned off by this song and finding it to be a tough listen. Maybe not on the level of Sister, but still a potentially tough listen.
Absolutely. And I think, for me, this was definitely a tough listen. It was one of those ones where I was like, yep, I see why this was kept in the vault. Maybe this was supposed to stay in the vault. Like, I usually I can get into the musicality more, even when, but even then it's typically like maybe one or two lines where it's like, ooh, that kind of skirted something possibly icky, but listen to those guitars. Here it was not only was in both versions the music fairly sparse, but the content was, kind of like with Sister, the content is so overwhelming. And I don't want to say too much because I know we're gonna kind of chop up the lyrics a little bit, but however old this character is, or the narrator of this song is, I'll say, however old the narrator of the song is, there's clearly a power dynamic where the song narrator is becoming aware, is very aware of how they are being abused, or could be abused, or end up being used and abused, and they then have the really unfair position of trying to convince the other person, who is presumably older and in a position of authority, to let them go. Like, I hear this song as a person asking for their agency and trying to gently persuade someone who has kept some sort of hold on them to release them. And it makes it a really tough listen. And it made tougher for me because even though I assume this was recorded sometime in his, not assume it was recorded in, but if there was an incident that this is based on, I assume that it took place sometime in his, possibly his later teen years, around the age between 16 and 18 or what have you. But it was made tougher because in my head, I was seeing cute little Skipper standing outside his junior high school, because the brain makes the connections that it makes, right? So that was the one time in life that I saw Prince talking about teachers, and then I heard this song, and it was just because the world is a messed up place sometimes, and we know that these things happen. It made it that much more difficult to separate the two, to say, nope, this was a grown man as an artist making a statement about something that we don't officially explicitly know. But when you read those lyrics and you read this narrator character, comforting the person, whoever the teacher role is, saying things like, I know you get discouraged, or I know you get lonely, but, and it doesn't make sense to stay with somebody or to hang on to somebody who's not going to stay. That's a tough thing to listen to.
Yeah, and honestly, when you put it in that perspective and painting the picture of Prince as a a young boy, even if that was younger than the age that this potentially, I mean, we're hypothesizing here. We don't really know if this happened or not, but let's just continue down that path. I think that also explains why I prefer the 82 solo Prince version, because we know Wendy and Lisa didn't write the song. So
right.
when they're singing it, it just has less emotional weight for me, because we know that they're not singing it from a place of pain or hurt. They're just singing whatever lyrics Prince gave them to sing.
Exactly.
And Prince singing this song, very stripped down, 82, him and his guitar, he wrote the song, he wrote the lyrics, so when he's singing it, you just get a bit more of a, as you mentioned, it adds a personal touch to it that the Wendy and Lisa version don't, because we know they didn't write it, so it's not from their perspective. And it's harder to hear somebody singing a song about a personal experience versus somebody writing a song about a personal experience and then giving it to somebody else to sing. It just, there's that disconnect, and it comes through as for listeners who know, like if somebody would have said Wendy and Lisa wrote this song and it's about a relationship that Wendy had with an older male teacher and it's really brutal, and like, okay, well then the 85 version is going to be the one that's more emotionally invested in, but that's not what happened here. So I totally agree with, and then that painting that picture of Prince as a young boy just makes it that much more striking of a, and it adds much more weight to it, I think. So what I would like to do, because I think we're both on the same page in terms of, even if I have historically looked at this song as being a metaphor, and you have historically, in the short amount of time that we've known this song, thought of it more as a personal statement and a personal experience with a literal teacher, I don't really think it changes all that much in terms of what the song is still trying to say at the end of the day. So like in the first verse, there's evidence throughout this first verse that you're on the right path, and I'm right with you, that the narrator of the song is struggling with this relationship, whatever you want to call it, with this person, and they're basically stating throughout the song, and I want to cite the evidence here in this first verse, that they don't really have the same kind of emotional investment anymore with this person. They're desperately trying to express, as you mentioned, their desire to be let go and be kind of freed from this emotional abuse that they're experiencing from this quote unquote teacher. I'm really not in love with you. So right off the bat, after saying teacher, teacher, I'm really not in love with you, that already gives us a chance to perceive these lyrics and interpret these lyrics coming from somebody who is kind of over it. Whatever it is that they're experiencing with this person, they're done with it. To say that you're not in love with them, then what is it that's being done with this person? Why are they still with them? And we find out throughout the song why they're still with them. It's because they feel some sort of, like they've been manipulated in some way to stay with them because of the power dynamic, or because of some of the things that the person is doing that one could point as being emotionally manipulative. You're the teacher. I try to do what you want me to. So kind of like eager to please, somebody who has that desire to please the person who they're with because of their power, because of their age, because of their experience, whatever it may be. We get the impression that that person is doing things for the other person, and it's not because they really want to necessarily. You got to know it wasn't love. Again, telling them that love is not really what this is about. It's not about love. It's about something else. But it's not about love.
Right.
It says, I'm just a young boy, so that's in Prince's version. Of course, then Wendy and Lisa changed it to I'm just a young girl. But really, that's the only difference between the songs lyrically, is just, again, the pronoun that was used there based off of who's singing the song. So early in the song, those are some of the things that help guide us as the listener towards a conclusion. But we need more. Like, we need a little bit more lyrics to kind of figure out what exactly he's talking about, I think. So what do you see in this first verse? I mean, are you kind of on the same page as far as the whole it's not love, and kind of telling us what is this then? What is this strange relationship?
Definitely. It's funny. I was thinking that earlier, and I was like, I'm not going to say that because it's a pun, but I'm glad that you did. The strange relationship. The definitely on the same page, recognizing that it's not love. What I find interesting here, though, just in terms of sort of the taxonomy of Prince lyrics and themes in Prince songs, is we've got another instance of him disqualifying himself. We see this in a lot of stuff. Right now, the one that's coming to mind is I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man. But where he will explain to, and that's another one where he's talking to directly to the person, where he's explaining very patiently why he's not what they're looking for, why he's not the answer. And here we have him saying, let me tell you, honey, I'm just a young boy. Don't think I know that enough. Or I don't think I know enough. Like, this is him, again, trying to make someone understand I'm not the droid you're looking for. But we don't, you're right. We don't yet know quite what this is. This, with just these lines, it could just be, something where it feels like, maybe a younger guy with a lot of swagger who got into a relationship with an older woman, and now that she's gotten sprung, he's trying to push her away. At this stage of the song, it could be that. And I think it's later that we start to really feel the pulls that makes it sound like, it makes you want to help this kid and get them out of it.
Yeah, exactly. The first verse doesn't give us enough to really understand where the narrator is coming from. He just keeps saying that he's not in love with you, that they're not in love with each other. It's not love. So what is it? He's young. He agrees that he's not in love with this quote unquote teacher. And I keep saying that because, again, if you're thinking of it as a metaphor, regardless. So let's say if it is a metaphor, this teacher, he's intentionally painting a picture of this teacher being somebody who has more experience, has more knowledge, probably chronologically older, and likely has some authority over him. Otherwise, why would he use that word as a metaphor to describe this person?
Right.
So whether it's a teacher or not a teacher, the fact that he calls her a teacher, and I'm saying her because we're kind of talking about the Prince version, and I'll continue to do that, and that people who prefer the Wendy and Lisa version, just swap out the genders. It's all good. But the other thing, I know you get lonely. So again, we get what he's telling us here is this person that he's with, this teacher, is lonely. And just by throwing that line in there, it tells us that potentially they're just together because of convenience. And maybe it's just there's other pieces at play as to why they're even in a relationship to begin with. And that's where we got to go a little further into the song to find out more. But before we get into the next verse, we get the chorus, and the chorus is fairly simple. It's just a repeat of teacher, teacher, I don't want to get an A. Teacher, teacher, there's got to be a better way. So the chorus is, I really enjoy the chorus. I think it's clever, and how it expresses, the desire of the narrator in a very succinct way, but also ties it back to the title of the song and ties it back to the teacher. What do you think about the chorus, Julian? Do you like how the wordplay that he uses here?
I like the wordplay. It's one of the parts that I struggle with a little bit because it makes it more juvenile. At a certain level of education, you don't even talk really in terms about getting an A. You talk about, passing the course. You talk about, like, there's something very, very, I mean, part of this too is the tone of the song, right? Like the actual voice used, the actual overall tonality of it has an almost romper room, elementary school kind of sensibility to it. But I don't want to get an A feels very, very elementary schoolish. Like it feels like a childish way of looking at it. Talking about, I guess talking about passing or making the grade or something like that might have made it feel a little bit more adult. And so while I like that he's doing the job of connecting those dots, not that it's difficult. He says teacher so many times in the song.
Yeah.
I find that to be a little bit jarring. There's a sense of an almost sense of sadness or pitiful for whoever this teacher character or metaphor is when you get to there's got to be a better way. Again, just that sort of gentle, comforting pleading that the narrator character is doing, trying to make this person see what he already sees, trying to get them to come to an understanding of their own that this isn't right. Like, yes, you're lonely, but I know you're lonely because you had to know this wasn't it. There's got to be a better way than this, and trying to encourage them to find it. So even though the chorus is, I think, deceptively simple, it sets a lot of the tone of the song.
Yeah, it does. And I think, your point about it being a little bit juvenile actually helps me a little bit understanding maybe what he's trying to say here. So when I hear this line, I don't want to get an A, and more specifically that one, to me it hammers home the point that this narrator no longer wants to please the teacher of the song. But
right.
So, like, I don't know about you personally, but when I was younger, I didn't get good grades because I cared. I got good grades because I wanted to please my teachers and my parents.
Yep.
Those were the people that I was most interested in pleasing and appeasing with getting good grades. It only became when I was older that I started, and when I say older, I mean teenage years and beyond, where the grades that I was getting were more because I wanted to, prove something to myself, where I wanted to be able to feel proud about the grades, and I really didn't care. It wasn't about pleasing my teachers or my parents anymore. So the fact that the person is saying, I don't want to get an A, I get the impression that he's saying that because he no longer wants to please the teacher in a way that makes them feel good about what's happening. Again, throughout
Absolutely.
the song, I get the feeling that this person, the narrator, is only in this relationship because they feel, and I've used this word before because I can't find a better word to use, but it feels somewhat manipulated to please this older person, and for them to declare, I don't want to get an A, so I don't want to please you anymore. I don't want to do this for you anymore, whatever it is that I'm doing, being your emotional crutch, or even the other thing that we haven't really touched on yet is the physical aspect. Has this relationship gone physical? I don't know if it has. There's evidence throughout the song that maybe suggests that they have never even been physical, and
Right.
the narrator's trying to push this teacher away before it becomes a physical thing. But just saying I don't want to get an A to me is Prince's way of saying I no longer want to please you.
And I think pushing this figure out of their role, because in the very second line we get, but you're the teacher, I try to do what you want me to do, or I try to do what you want me to. But when we get to I don't want to get an A and there's got to be a better way, you see them, the narrator stepping outside of the role of student, and accordingly pushing that person out of the role of teacher. Like once I'm no longer interested in, making your grade or learning or studying what you want me to learn or study, you're no longer any kind of teacher. And so we start to see in the course, we start to see the beginning of the quest for autonomy, and agency, that, the first line of the next verse, I think, really hammers home.
Yeah, you talk about the I'm sick and tired of making plans without making up my mind.
Right.
Hmm.
Because, that's somebody coming to the realization, I hadn't even decided I wanted this, or decided whatever we've been doing, I hadn't thought about it, hadn't really done any, hadn't been invested in it, had no agency in the plans that were made. I was just kind of going along to get along, and now I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
I want a chance to make up my mind. And then, as we move through that verse, can't you see I just need a little time? Again, we're kind of at that. It's this is part of what makes it feel so young, right? Like, this is that I've come to a point where I realize what I want and what I don't want. But at the same time, there's a little part of me that doesn't want you to be upset, doesn't want you to be hurt, doesn't want to, I'm no longer interested in being wholly responsible for your emotional state. But there's a little bit of pulling back when you say, can't you see I just need a little time? Is very different than saying, I'm out, I'm done, time's up. This is sort of it almost implies I might come back, I might want this at some point, but I need some time. And that's that kind of letting down gently that still makes this narrator feel a little bit beholden to the person that they're trying to convince to let them go. And that pull, that back and forth between I'm ready to go and won't you please let me go, it's what gives this song that tension that I think really challenged me with trying to figure out the age and the relationship of the narrator. This isn't a typical, uh, you know, I'm done with this. What's love got to do with it? Uh, any of those other songs where it's like a typical breakup song where it's like the singer, the narrator of that song is washing their hands of the other person. This is actually what's love got to do with, not a breakup song. But anyway, we don't do that on this show. Um, but it's 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 still there's still some pain here. There's still some kind of relationship. There's still a little bit of deference, that peeks out in some of these very specific word choices.
Yeah, and you mentioned agency earlier, and the second half of this second verse, I really get the impression that the narrator has regained some of that agency. I know you've been crying because you spent the night alone. So again, they're painting a picture about this person being lonely. I know you get lonely in the first verse. I know you've been crying because you spent the night alone. So it's almost like they're painting the picture of this person being almost pitiful in ways.
Right.
So like the narrator's taking pity on the teacher of the song, but not willing to go all the way in some respects by saying, "Cry me a river. It's why I don't deliver. We'll have to do it on the phone." So I'm not going to come to your rescue. I'm not going to come see you in person. Sure, we can do it on the phone and whatever that it may be, we can use our imaginations, but they're not going to just jump when the teacher says how, or you're not going to say how high when the teacher says jump. In this case, you're not going to come see them just because you're lonely and you're crying. I get that. You've used that tactic on me before and it's worked potentially, but I'm, kind of regaining that agency in this relationship, in this semi breakup song, by saying, and I say semi because they're still willing to leave that door open a crack. I need a little more time, as you mentioned before, in the fact that they're willing to still talk with them on the phone. I don't deliver. I don't just come to you whenever you call me. And whatever you need from me, we're just going to have to do it on the phone. That's just going to have to be good enough. Which is interesting, I think. It's interesting about, again, gaining that agency, because if this is truly a song about somebody being 100% abused in some ways, I don't know if we would get lines like that.
Right, right. There's definitely like an establishment of boundaries, and while the narrator's doing it gently and with some, with maybe even some caution, we're getting, as the song progresses, I think we're getting a clearer sense that whatever used to happen, that's going to be stopping. It might not be like a clear 100% this ends today, but this person has had an awakening and is stopping the continuation or the progression, really, of whatever this relationship had been.
Mm-hmm.
And there is throughout these lines, even when the narrator's being gentle, there is a glibness that is decidedly Prince throughout. It's the use of the word honey, the use of, well, you can cry me a river. There's a certain sort of sense of a shoulder shrug that you get whenever Prince is done with somebody. Even reportedly in his real life romantic relationships, and certainly throughout most of his songs, when Prince is done, there's like a, I don't want this to suck, but also, oh well. And there's a snottiness a little bit in, let me tell you, honey, I'm just a young boy, and honey, I can't let you use my body. Like there's it's not gentle, it's not baby, that's not I'm trying to comfort you. That's, girl, get your shit together. And on one hand, I love it, and on the other hand, I'm like, does that fit the way this song sounds? But I do find it interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, it does. It sometimes it conflicts a little bit with the emotional weight that Prince puts into the performance and how he uses some of these lyrics throughout, but then he'll throw lines like you've cited, and then what it does is it kind of lessens maybe the emotional impact. Like it's like, oh, this guy's, he's going to be okay. You
Right.
get the feeling like he's not going to be completely warped or by this relationship, or have some sort of damaged psyche over it. Like you almost get the feeling, because of the glibness, that, and it could be a defense mechanism. I mean, we all know a lot of times those are defense mechanisms, but what I think it does a little bit is it lessens the impact in some ways, whether that was intentional because he didn't want it to be that serious. He didn't want people to feel that bad for the narrator, or if it was just his way because, the style of songwriter that he was, or the person that he was, to inject those types of lines. Like, I'm not going to let some woman, affect me that badly. But then again, he'll write songs where he's completely fucked in the head because of a woman. So, he goes both ways sometimes. Like, I don't need you versus, oh my God, I can't live without you.
Right.
We get both kinds of songs from Prince on any given day.
I think that's why, part of me reads those a little bit as defense mechanisms. And I think all Prince fans want to kind of get in his head and figure out how he felt about things by trying to dissect, everything from the words to the particular wail of his voice in any given song. But I think because I feel like this, if I know that if I let myself feel, I'm going to go completely, mental devastation, then I'm probably going to start putting up little bulwarks and mental blocks to keep me from getting there. So if in my art I've got basically two speeds, 0 and 120, I'm probably going to do everything that I can when I'm writing about difficult subjects that I don't want to let devastate me, to try and soften it. And that's how I read things like this, as even, and to be perfectly honest, that's part of what I think might have been his intention in giving the song to Wendy and Lisa to record. It was still something he wanted to say, had to write, had to get it out, but didn't feel like he could own it completely, because I think if there is a real relationship here, regardless of what age it might have taken place during, or whether or not the teacher figure was a literal teacher, if there was a real relationship here, that person was definitely someone that was influential on Prince. That person would have definitely been somebody that Prince cared about because of that influence, and someone that Prince recognized was toxic for him in some way, and so he had to walk away. And that has the potential to be tremendously emotionally devastating if you let yourself feel it all the way. And that's, in my interpretation of the song as an entire piece of art, the sonics and everything included, the musicality and everything included, that's how it occurs for me, as he wanted to address it, but he couldn't let himself get too close to it. He had to put up those defenses. He had to make it sound almost like Schroeder was playing it on a toy, piano. Like it has such a lightness and bounce to it, even in the speeding up of it. In the Wendy and Lisa version, it's almost like how when you're telling a painful story and you race through it, because you don't want to linger on the details too much. And it's crazy, but I'd say like a good third of this song, lyrically, is him repeating the words teacher, teacher. So for as much as we're able to pull out of it and dissect and investigate, he doesn't really say that much. It's a thing. It happened. He's racing through it, and then he's done with it. And then he's so done with it, he gave it to somebody else to make it their song.
Yeah, and they really do. They completely transform it musically and through the performance. Not lyrically. Lyrically, right. It's basically the same, but adding the instruments and turning it into a faster, more upbeat song. Adding music into it that makes it lighter, makes it more palatable. And then you would think that women singing a song about a potentially abusive relationship would have more impact, right? Because that's typically in our society how that power dynamic works, although there's plenty of examples of older women taking advantage of younger men. So I definitely don't want to give the impression that that's not a thing, because it is. But we're just so used to, through just sheer numbers and also how our culture is and how patriarchal it is, experiencing this being more of something that women have had to go through, young women have had to go through with older men. And again, I go back to the fact that they didn't write it, so it's just harder for me to apply that emotion and feeling to their version. And then the music that they add makes it sunnier, but it doesn't make it more emotional. It doesn't add more to that.
And I think their version of it, the music that they add and the sunniness of it, and I think that's a perfect descriptor of it, it fits with the time period when it was recorded. Like these sadly, this was still something to joke about in the early 80s. This was still like you would see these kinds of relationships played for laughs in sitcoms of the early 80s, where who am I thinking of? Blair in dear God, I'm old. But Blair in The Facts of Life, uh was her character would often trade on her beauty and her looks to try and solicit something from the teachers at that school.
Yeah.
There was another show that, the same kind of thing. And, there's a power dynamic and a clear abuse of power on the head of the teacher, but it was always played as, vixen like student and hapless teacher who's just trying to do what they're supposed to do. Those were joking things back then. So I don't think it's coincidental or even an accident that Prince handed it over and let them turn his pain into pop, because that's
Yeah.
that's effectively what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Pain into pop is exactly the way I interpret how this song has transformed. Yep. The third verse is interesting to me, and it's a fairly short song, it's just over 3 minutes, three verses, repeat of the chorus, and then some just ad-libbing in the outro. The third verse is interesting to me because it gives the listener kind of almost some closure about the relationship. I'm not trying to get you down, but why should you get used to somebody who won't be around? So that's another very kind of plain, straightforward way of saying, I'm over this. I'm done with it. It may take a while, but I'm not going to be around forever. Either because I'm going to graduate and I'm going to leave, like if it's a
right.
literal teacher scenario, or just that person, the narrator, has made the decision that they're going to end this at some point, and they haven't really got around to just finalizing it. Maybe not sure how long they want to stay with the person before they finalize it, but they've made the decision. Why get used to somebody who's not going to be around? I'm not going to be around that much longer. So I don't think that this is a really smart relationship for us to continue to invest in, because it's going nowhere. As far as I'm concerned, the narrator is saying it's going nowhere. I know you get discouraged because you want to give it all the time, but honey, I can't let you use my body the same way you use my mind. And while those last two lines, can't let you use my body the same way you use my mind, is some way sad, because they're using the word use, not like it's mutual, but they're being used. The narrator
Right.
admits that, and they've accepted that they're being used. But going back to the agency thing, and this is why I've struggled, like I don't necessarily believe that they even had anything physical. Because in the previous verse, he talks about, that's why I don't deliver. We'll have to do it on the
Right.
phone. And then here, I can't let you use my body, even though you want to give it all the time. Meaning, like, you always want to get physical with me. You're expressing an interest in engaging in a physical relationship, but I can't let you do that, even though you've emotionally manipulated me for however long this has been going on, with your crying and your tears and being lonely. I'm so lonely. And allowing them to kind of get pulled in by that. But you almost feel like this person has matured enough to see the relationship for exactly what it is. It's not real. There's no love there, as he says in the first verse. Doesn't believe there's any love. It's all about being there for a person who's lonely, but only at an emotional level, not a physical level. And they're basically putting their foot down. We're not going to go there. We're not going to do the physical thing. I don't want it.
Right.
There's no love there. I think you've been using me. I'm tired of you using me. I've let you use my mind long enough. My body's off limits, and eventually this is going to end. That's how I kind
And
of take it
there's
at the end.
Oh yeah, 100%. And you mentioned closure. There's really a little bit of triumph there for me. Like that last line, it's like you almost kind of want to go, "Whew." Like there's we're clear now. It's absolutely done. The line is 100% drawn. The only thing that I wish, if I was allowed to wish something, is I wish that it had been used, my mind, past tense, versus used the way it is, at least the way I hear it. Do you hear it
True.
as used?
I hear use, not used.
Yeah.
Past tense.
I just, the one thing that I wish would be that it was past tense, that we had complete closure, that it was completely done. The fact that it's still present tense, it feels like they drew the line. They should have inched the line up a little bit further.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know. I guess it almost kind of feels like, well, you take your wins where you can get them. I've certainly been in relationships that have had this kind of complication where it's like you let someone become too close emotionally, and you were clear going in what that relationship was, but for whatever reason, you failed to make it clear for them what it was or wasn't, or they just failed to hear you and you kept letting it go on. I've definitely been guilty of that. But I did that, as, I'm not going to say a mature adult, but definitely a full-on adult, like a tax-paying adult who should have known better.
Sure.
And I think here that's the difference of the power dynamic. We know for sure one of these characters should have known better. The narrator character, ostensibly Prince, is making it clear that this teacher person really should have known better from the beginning. But you got to know it wasn't love. Come on, you had to know. There were so many clues. But at the end, while we know that both characters at this point either know better or should have known better, because the narrator at this point has made clear they recognize the relationship for exactly what it is, as you said, but they're still choosing to let part of that dysfunction remain, because they don't close it completely. And again, with lines like, what was the other one? Can't you see I just need a little time? That's still leaving the door open. So when we get to, I can't let you use my body the same way you use my mind, still suggests that the mind, we'll still talk. You just have to know it's never going to be sex. And that's okay. But I think a fuller victory would have been time to find somebody else, or maybe you need to take another class, or something that would have paid off the metaphor, but had this character walk completely away.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. I mean, he doesn't do that. He definitely leaves the door ajar, so to speak, and because the lack of the past tense and because the lines as you cited, I agree with you. There's certainly, while there's acceptable closure, it's not quite as satisfying. If again we're listening to the song and we want the best for the narrator, we're like,
right.
You're getting there. Like you truly have enough self-awareness to know that this is not healthy, and we're proud of you for recognizing that and expressing that. But man, you might need to just make a clean break at some point. And I don't think he's ready for that.
Right. Now, is it in the fade out, because it at a certain point it just becomes teacher over and over again? Is there a part where Prince says, make up your mind?
What is printed in the I go to a website called Moonbeam Levels for You. It gives good breakdowns of lyrics.
Nice.
What they say here is he says things like, I don't want to do it, don't make me do it, accept your mind, preserve your mind. No, I don't want to. Okay. I don't see make up your mind, but maybe it's, I've listened to the song a few times in preparation, and a lot of those lines are kind of said under his breath, behind the music a little bit, as the song fades out. So you have to kind of accept that these are just one person's interpretation of what they're hearing and documenting.
Right.
There could be other alternate websites with different transcribed lines. But yeah, towards the end, he just, because those lines are not in the 85 version. So the 82 version just 20 seconds longer or so, because the stuff that he's saying towards the end, the ad-libbing, is present in the 82 version. While in the 85 version, it's more cut and dry, it fades out versus just ends as the 82 version does. So yeah, he's throwing some stuff out there about, talking about the mind, because that's the last line that he says in the third verse, the same way you use my mind. And if he says, accept your mind and preserve your mind, as the website that I'm using, that I think he's just kind of riffing on the idea of like his mind is his, and it's been used by this person long enough, and so I need to take that power back. I need to get you out of my mind so I can start to preserve my sanity, or preserve who I am as a human being, and that isn't so tied up with the manipulation that this teacher is engaging in. It's kind of what I get from him saying things like that. Accept your mind, preserve your mind.
I like that, and I, honestly, that gives me a little bit more. It's those two lines are another boost of hope. Whether accept your mind, preserve your mind is the narrator talking to himself, or whether it's the narrator speaking to, now kind of stepping outside, or air quote, breaking the fourth wall, if you will, speaking to the listener of the song and not necessarily to the teacher, encouraging anybody else that's, in a similar situation to preserve their mind and accept your mind, like, what's right, accept it, and take care of yourself. That's a hopeful read for me. I like that. That helps sweeten the ending a little bit more. Still bittersweet, but lends a little bit more to the sweet than the bitter.
Yeah, and the fact that those aren't present in the 85 version, again, just another example of the song being more poppy and less deep, less emotionally deep. And I take it to the same way you do, that he's kind of stepping outside of the narrator at that moment, and he's basically speaking to the listener. So I get the same, because I think he's done that a few times in songs, where he kind of, when he's just going off and just saying whatever at the end of the song, probably not written down, right, just things that he came up with in the moment. I always have gotten the sense when he does that he's no longer the narrator of the song anymore. He's just Prince singing things that make sense and kind of fit the theme of the song, but no longer speaking in, from the perspective of the person who he had been singing from prior.
I get that too with other songs of his, and it really adds a layer that we get the artist, we get the character who the artist is being in the artwork, and then at some point we get just the man. We get the man so present in the moment that whatever the construct of the artistry is cast aside, whatever the character was that he was being in the song is cast aside, and it's just him. And at any given moment in some of his more emotional songs, you can kind of separate out. Like, I think most of us have become comfortable with Prince as sort of a duality, the Gemini character, but I think sometimes we get three different layers of him. And this is one where at the end, I think, it's not even Prince the artist, it's Prince the guy. It's Prince the man who's thinking about this stuff and just saying what needs to be said to exercise whatever this experience was for him in reality.
So do you have any final thoughts on the song? Anything that you haven't expressed already?
Nope. Only that this is probably the last time I'll listen to it. This is not the feel-good song of the year, despite Wendy and Lisa's best efforts. This one probably won't be in rotation, but it's definitely dope to examine and unpack with you.
Yeah, agreed. All right, well, I think we've psychoanalyzed this song long enough. So yeah, I don't have any further thoughts on Teacher either. I think it's a good song. And if you just think of it from the musical standpoint, whether you like the 82 or 85 version, it's very well constructed, it's well performed. And if you can set aside any, negative thoughts that the song may generate in you based off of the subject matter and the themes, it can be enjoyable. But if you're unable to do that, then maybe the song kind of fits under the category of difficult Prince songs I don't like to listen to very often. And that's a category. I mean, there are songs like that. Whether he's just really emotionally bare, and he's singing about really tough subject matter. Maybe sometimes the performances are very raw, and it's hard to listen to because of that. I don't think the performance of this song necessarily is so raw that it's hard to listen to because of that. I think it's more of the subject matter can potentially make it less fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Papa from the album Come is another one of those, like, I'm going to put this over here on that box. I understand why you had to record it. Don't know why it made the album, but another one that's just emotionally too raw to be able to, you can't enjoy it. You can appreciate it for the art that it is, but I would wonder who could actually enjoy the song. Now watch, I've probably torqued off some of your listeners who are like, that's my favorite song.
Well, I mean, I think most anybody, even if they do like the song, I think it'd be easy for them to appreciate where you're coming from because of the subject matter. Not everybody, it's like any kind of art. Like, some people will never watch a movie that shows, a violent rape. While I can appreciate it for what it is, I totally get why somebody else may never want to experience that for themselves, and I respect that. And then Papa's, a song like that. Maybe this song isn't, for me personally, this song isn't quite to that level of like Papa, for example, or
the
Sister.
performance on Papa is just gut-wrenching. This is not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The performance definitely softens the blow on Teacher. Okay. Well, with that said, Julian, I definitely wanted to thank you for joining me on this episode again, despite this not being one of the songs that you've had a long history with or have a great backstory to go along with it. So thank you for coming out of your comfort zone, so to speak, and to join me on an episode about a song that you weren't all that familiar with prior to, recently. So thank you.
Oh, more than my pleasure. Thanks for having me and for letting me riff on it with you.
Cool. So where can people find you on social media if you'd like to be found?
From time to time, I say something glib or clever on Twitter. You can find me at that's the numeral 1, Julian B. Long. Facebook and everything is pretty much dried up while I'm pursuing this Master of Fine Arts degree. But as soon as they give me permission to write again, I'm going to do it. So keep your eyes peeled, and you'll see me on the socials talking about my next project.
Yeah, so I just recommend anybody to just follow Julian, and so when he's ready to and has the time and energy to, then you'll be right there, ready for it, and you can experience it in real time. So definitely follow him wherever is your social media avenue of choice. And I'd like to again say thank you to all the listeners. This has been Press Rewind Prince Lyrics Podcast. I've been your host, Jason Brenninger. You can find the show at pressrewind.net. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, on all of them. Check out the latest and greatest Facebook and Instagram profiles. Again, links to those updated profiles will be in the show notes. In case you were following the show on Facebook and Instagram before and you need to refollow the new links, that's where you can find them. And until next time, thank you very much and goodbye.